Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today we are going to be using Snow Wonderful by Your Next Stamp. And this is another brand that I have not tried before and was kind of branching out to try. I really thought that the little stamp set was adorable and it was good quality. I would absolutely buy their stamps again. So I wanted to do a banner. And none of the banner dies that I had were wide enough for the sentiment I wanted to use. So I'm going to draw one. You know, I'm a big fan of anything that kind of makes a card your own. And for me, a lot of times it's my background, and this time it's going to be this banner. So I just used a T-square ruler to just give myself 4 little points so that everything was even. And now I'm just drawing it in with a mechanical pencil. Well, you can Google it or Pinterest, whatever you have. Or you can watch me do it, I suppose. But there's tons of tutorials on how to draw your own banner if you're into hand lettering, which I kind of am. It's been a minute since I've done anything, but banners are really easy to do, especially if you don't have one that suits your needs. So here, my lines are uneven. My little zigzag lines are uneven, and I didn't want it to be, I didn't want the banner to be huge. Like, I didn't want it to fall back too much. I still wanted there to be room for my characters from my stamp set. So I'm just going to go ahead and pencil this in. Like I said, the way that it's just like a little zigzag line and a couple of straight lines. I mean, really, that's all that there is to the banner. Once I get it down in pencil, I am going to go and outline it in a Copic Safe pen. I use the EK Success journaling pen. And I didn't show that, but when I did it, I did use the ruler to make sure everything was straight. I need to mask this because I was going to make a 1-layer card. Didn't turn out like that, but in order to mask it, what I do is I just copy it on my printer, and then I have this thin piece of copy paper. I will cut it out as my mask, and then I just use Tombow Mono multi-glue. I use this for everything, but the main selling point for me is that it's repositionable. So if you put it down while it's wet, it's permanent, and then if you wait for it to dry, it's repositionable. And I usually just press it on my palm or put my fingertips on it a couple of times just to make sure it's not too sticky. And then I put that down, and now I'm going to go ahead and stamp my characters, which this one has this adorable little girl with a little reindeer. And then the other one is like a little elf with a candy cane. They're just such cute little images. So originally, like I said, I was looking to do a 1-layer card, so I masked off the bottom. It didn't end up going out like that. So this is Salty Ocean. I'm just giving myself a little bit of a blue halo to the background. And then once I was happy with that color, I went back in with the blueprint sketch, and I really concentrated that just on the center, like where the characters are. I will note that the candy cane kept moving on me. The little mask just was not staying put. So what I ended up doing was using a small piece of tape and taping it to the reindeer, and that held it in place and worked really well. So I'm going to remove all the masks, and then this is what it looks like right now. We're going to go into the Copic coloring, which I have to tell you there is a ton of. I'm sure when you started this video you noticed that it was 20 minutes long. I don't know why that is. I feel like I didn't use a ton of colors, but I guess it's just because there's so many little things, especially when you're coloring people. There's so many little things to color. So I always color as if my light source is in the top right hand corner, and that's how I'm doing their skin tone. So this girl on the left, her should be like looking at the light source, so that's going to be the lightest part of her face. Her hair will cast a shadow onto her face, and the left side of her face will be darker. For the girl on the right, the light source will be kind of up above her, so the hair that's falling over her face will cast a shadow on her face, and then the left hand side would also just be slightly darker. If you decided to do a, what do they call it, like a center light, it would look fairly similar. For the girl on the right, both sides of her face would be darker and the highlight would be in the center. But you just, whatever is comfortable for you, your comfortable light source. That was a weird way of saying that. Whatever. Moving on. Your whatever light source, however you like to do it. This is just how I was taught in high school. Like, our light source was always in the top right. I think it was just easier for the teacher to know, like, at a glance whether or not we were doing it correctly, because we all were the same. But it just stuck with me into adulthood. I gave them a little bit of a rosy cheek, and then we're going to move on to the hair for both of the girls, and then also for the reindeer. So you hear me say all the time that you don't need all of the Copics. You certainly don't. I have, what does Lydia call it? Full set syndrome. I have full set syndrome, so I am slowly but surely trying to purchase all of the Copics, but even I don't have all of them. And if you watch my videos, you know I use the same ones all the time anyway, so I don't know why I feel like I need all of them, but I do. It's a problem. But I wanted to show how we could color all 3 of these items with the same colors, and they would look totally different. So here I'm making her a blonde, and I'm using E50 as my lightest color and E57. E57 is my darkest color. And I'm only putting that darkest color really truly where it would be the darkest. So where her bangs are kind of overlaying, and then at the back of her head where it tucks into her hat. Then I dropped the E50 and I added the E59 to do the next girl's hair. And even though we are using the majority of the same colors, it's 2 totally different looks. So for her, the hair that's falling underneath her hat will be darker, and then the hair that is falling behind her shoulders will also be darker. She doesn't really have much of a highlight except for like on the top right hand side of her head, and then I'm also adding more dark next to her little bangs, the little piece that curls up, because I wanted to kind of set that piece apart since it's laying on top of all of the other hair. And this is especially when you do hair, you want to use a light hand and small flicking motions. Sometimes it can be very difficult when you're coloring a smaller image, and these are not big by any standards. So you just need to be aware when you're coloring them that either A, don't use a lot of colors. I always use 4, that's just what I'm comfortable with, but it certainly isn't necessary. You use as many as you're comfortable using. And you have to use a really light hand. So this is really good practice for getting that light hand. And a lot of times when you're using the darkest color, it's almost like you can't even feel the pen touching the paper. Like, that's how light we're talking. And that does come with practice. So if it doesn't, if it doesn't turn out the way that you wanted to right away, I'm sure it'll still be pretty. It might just be different than what you originally envisioned, but don't give up on yourself, because it'll come. Eventually, if you keep practicing, it'll come. So we're going back to, on the reindeer, we're going to use the whole gamut, from the E50 all the way down to the E59. And for most of it, it's going to be the midtones. So for his body, my lightest color is going to be the E53. And because the light source is in the top right, the little girl would cast a shadow. So with the lights underneath those lights in her arm, that would all cast a shadow onto the reindeer. So those would be darker parts, since the lights are kind of like wrapped around his body, her body, him, her. I don't think it matters. And so then the little antlers. What? Antlers. I have no idea what is going on right now, but apparently I cannot enunciate. Good Lord in heaven. The antlers where they attach would be slightly darker, and then that leg that sits in the back, I actually colored the whole thing with the E55, because anything that's darker falls into the background, so I wanted that to be slightly darker than the rest of the body. Going through with the E57, really hitting up those shadows for the body. That's going to be my darkest shading, is the E57. And then we're going to go back through from the lightest to the darkest, and we're going to start building that color out. There's quite a bit of this deer that is still white, and we really just want a small area that's going to be highlighted. So on the front of his body, on the top of his head, those will all be have just a little bit of light that hits them. I didn't, when I was coloring, I didn't add any shading to his lightest parts. So like his belly, his underbelly and his chest, his belly and his chest, and then like a little bit of his face. I didn't add any shading to that, and then as I was coloring, I realized that it really did kind of need something. So I just added just a little bit of shading to the underside of his face and underneath his neck with the E53. Then for the antlers, we're going to use the same trick that we did with that back leg. We're going to color the back set of antlers all with the E57, and then do the darkest parts with the E59. And then for the front antler, we're going to color the whole thing with E55 and then do the darkest parts with the E57. And that's just, to help play up that dimension, so one looks like it is sitting behind the other. Now with that done, that's going to be all of the browns that we're going to be using, and we're going to move on to the fun colors. So I don't even know how to make a Christmassy card without red. I don't even know how to do it. So like this color combination is pretty much in everything I've been making lately. Originally, when I started to do her hat, I was going to leave a really harsh highlight on the top, and that's why you'll see I left that white break there, just so that it would be a stronger highlight. After I added in the shading, so the back left of her head is going to be the darkest point because it's the furthest away from the light source. And there would be just a hint of color on the right hand side where it would wrap back around, but really the darkest is going to stay on the left hand side. As I started adding this and blending out my colors, once I got done and I realized that white spot was actually making it look like her hat was shiny. Like you can see here, like it looks like her hat is shining, and it is not shining, it's cloth. So I just covered that up with my lightest color and moved on. See, it doesn't always, even people who do it all the time, sometimes you try something different and it doesn't work out, and that's okay then. You just adjust and move on. So for her skirt, I still wanted she's got a lot of pleats in there, and it is a tiny, tiny image, so tiny. And so I'm just sticking right on top of the lines that are already there with my darkest color. In these situations where things are just so small, I don't go over it twice because I don't want my markers to bleed out into the rest of my characters. So I just go over them one time, and usually that's fine because the images are so small you wouldn't even notice the blend. I certainly could have got away with not using 4 colors here, but old habits die hard. So you would maybe only need 2 at the max, probably 3. You certainly don't need 4. And then I just went back in and added a little bit of shading where it's gathered at the top. I'm also going to, I knew I was going to do some of the lights red, but I didn't know which lights were going to be red until I got all of the rest of the red on the paper, because I didn't want to put them right next to each other. I wanted there to be a good flow. So for this candy cane, I started with my darkest color and just did a little bit of a line, and then a medium color, and then my lightest. And later on, I'm going to do that with the white, with the C's. I'm not going to show it to you because it's 20 minutes, folks. I know. I mean, I did the survey last week before, and everybody said that they would rather just have one long video, which is totally fine. But that means that we're together for 20 minutes, and I'm sure that you have other things you'd rather be doing. So now we're going to move on to coloring the whites, and anytime you're coloring something white, you want to make sure that you leave some white. Otherwise, it's just going to look gray. And so we're adding the shading on the little top of that puffball, and I left a white ring, and then I just put a little dot of C3. I also colored the white on the other elf. And then we're going to do the banner. This is why I stamped my sentiment in the intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp, because I knew that I was going to want to add some shading to the banner. And where they would, just naturally where it curves, there would be a little bit of a shadow. And then where it bends back and stands in front of itself, there would be a shadow. There would also be a little bit of a shadow. I did the little lines, and that's just left over from hand lettering things. Adding those little details in there, those lines. But I also added some shading with the markers. And on the front piece, I only used the C1. On the back ones, I used C3 to kind of blend out, and then just a little line of C5. You wouldn't think that a little line of something would matter so much, But it really does, it just helps to bump up that contrast and give you that dimensional look. So I went back in with the C5 on top of those lines, those areas that would be the darkest, and then blended it out with the C3. So bright greens, because like I said, can't make a card for Christmas without red, can't make a card for Christmas without green. I don't know why, I got a problem. Maybe I'll try to force myself to do a non-traditional Christmas card. But her hat this is one of those tricky things. So the darkest part's going to be to the left, but it's so tiny where it hangs down that you want some shadows in there, but you don't want it to be completely dark because your light source is shining on it. So again, we're just using the tip of our marker, very, very few lines just to get in that contrast, but not completely destroy the highlight. So just go slow, take your time, do what you're comfortable with. On these particular ones, that bright green is so bright. The YGO one, I mean, it looks neon. It isn't, but it looks like almost fluorescent. And so it's a really good color for a highlight. I went ahead and colored in her, I don't know if it's a dress or a shirt. What does this look like? Okay, looking at the rest of the stamp, it is a shirt. I went ahead and colored that also just a solid green. And again, because of where our light source is, where her candy cane would cast a shadow onto her body, and then her head and the collar would cast a shadow onto her clothing. This is one of those things where it's like a little bit tricky because you don't want your arms to blend into your body, but they would both be dark. So in those situations, I just use my darkest color on the part that would be the furthest set back. So I'm just going to use the 67 on the part that is on her arm. So the part that's all the way set back, and then blend everything out. I'm not going to show you me coloring the lights. I'm just going to show you the colors. I colored them yellow. And then we're going to move on to the rest of the clothing. I did all of the lights the same way. That's why I didn't show you the yellow ones. It's because I showed you the red ones. So I was really struggling for a color here because I had used everything so traditional, and I was going to color her shirt yellow. But I remember when I was blonde, back in the day, I was like 18, super blonde hair. It was not a good look for me. But oddly enough, my mother loved it. I don't know. It was poor choice for me. But anyway, I remember back in the day that when I was blonde, I couldn't wear yellow because I just looked completely washed out. So I couldn't give her yellow clothes because she was going to look completely washed out. So I opted to go with teal. I toyed with purple, but I decided that I was going to go with teal. I was really loving the teal and red together, and I thought that it would also work well with the the neon greenish, the lime green I had going. So I thought they would be okay. Now you can see in the background that I didn't cut out all of the masks because it was very intricate. So this is how I fix that. I just pick a couple of colors that match my background, and then I go in with a Copic and just kind of fill it in. That works for me. I'm sure it would be fine. I mean, whatever colors you have, just kind of pay attention to that if this is something that you want to do. So I'm going to use the white gel pen. This particular stamp has the highlights of the lights drawn in, but they're so tiny there was no way I could avoid them. So I just filled them back in with a white gel pen, and then I did the same thing with their buttons and added a little highlight to Rudolph's nose. I outline all of my images, and so I'm using the same pen that I drew the banner with, and I'm just going to go ahead and outline everything so it has a nice bold black outline. And then I realized that I really just hated the placement of this image on this card. Like, it was way too low. So we're going to cut it out. And we're just going to do something just a little bit different. So that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way that you thought it would, and that's cool. So here I have a tuxedo black marker by Memento, and I'm just doing the edges of the card. I found that it's easier for me to do it from the back, so if the marker slips, it doesn't mess up any of my image. It's just on the back of the card. Then I'm going to put Scotch foam tape on the back, and I have a piece of blue. I should have learned the name of it. I don't know the name, but all of the supplies will be listed in the YouTube description and also on my blog. It's shimmer paper from Simon Says Stamp. And I just really loved like the whole idea, like Christmas, things should be shimmery and glittery and super pretty. And so I'm going to pop this up on foam, and I did trim the top of the panel down. I'm sure you'll notice there's a lot of white missing. And then I just popped it up over this blue shimmer paper, and that was it. I called it a day. I was perfectly happy with the way that it looked, even though it wasn't necessarily what I had in mind to begin with. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you guys learned a little something, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.